Welcome back, guys, to World of Tanks with Verknechter and Inferno, and as I promised, today we're going to talk about the main problems in World of Tanks. We're also going to talk briefly about the quick fixes, and we're going to talk about long-term commitments that Wargaming has to put into the game if it's going to stay viable. Basically, this started out, this project, when we came back to World of Tanks about half a year ago or something, and we thought that the game wasn't brilliant anymore, to say the least. But we're going to try and be constructive and tell you what we think should be fixed and why it should be fixed. And we're going to have separate videos for each and every one of those, but I'm just going to briefly outline what the main problems are in this video. Right, these are the problems that we see, or some of the problems we see, the main sort of problems. Maybe there are others, you know, not claiming that this is a complete list, and they're also in no particular order. So some of them are more important than others, but they may be at the back, whatever. The first problem I'm going to talk about very briefly is Matchmaker. The first problem is the 357 template, which Wargaming have vowed to fix. But even if they do fix that template, we're going to talk about the problems in a separate video, right? But even if they do fix that, +2, -2 matchmaking is still a big deal, and it's still toxic. Why is that? Because you cannot balance a vehicle in such a way that it is competitive 2 tiers higher, and that it is you know, that you can fight against it 2 tier lowers. So basically what it means is you take a tier 8 tank and you put it against tier 6 vehicles. It's going to ruffle stomp them, obviously. On the other hand, if you take the same tier 8 tank and you match it against tier 10 vehicles, it in turn is going to get ruffle stomped. So quite obviously it is impossible to balance them in such a way. And that takes us to exactly the second point, vehicle balance. There are a lot of OP tanks, meaning that they are generally too good for their tier. There are a lot of underpowered tanks as well, obviously. There are a lot of broken tanks, meaning they are good in one particular situation, and if they get into that situation, they can completely halt gameplay. For example, the Badger is such an example, I believe. The next problem is also the premium tanks and the preferential matchmaking tanks. They are a big problem as well. That takes us to the next problem, ammunition, because even if we get matchmaking fixed, and even if we manage to balance all the vehicles properly, gold ammunition, or ammunition in general, is going to be a problem. And we'll certainly have a video about that. The next problem I have is with artillery. I've tried to play a few games as artillery. I find it absolutely boring. And the only time I can laugh is when I one-shot people, and it still happens, and it's still annoying as all fuck if you're in that tank. So I believe, we believe, that artillery is currently even more toxic than it used to be. And we'd like to see that fixed. And I believe there are some easy, quick fixes you can do to artillery. The next one is tank modeling. There are some tanks that look like they might have weak spots. For example, the Chrysler GF has machine gun ports, but they're not actually modeled in the game. And you have to go to third-party websites such as tanks.gg to actually see if they're modeled or not, which I think is an abysmal state of affairs. There are also, for example, the Super Pershing has a cupola, or it looks like it has a cupola, but actually it's not modeled. If you shoot it, it just goes through. That is ridiculous. The next big thing, and that is actually the first thing I'm going to talk about, is map design. I believe the current map design in World of Tanks promotes a particular game style, and that is actually the origin of most problems. I'm not going to talk about XVM stats. I think, for example, I think so Fosh or someone has talked about XVM stats, and I'm not particularly interested in that. Apparently they're going to get removed or something, so, you know, it's not really the biggest part of my worries. I am going to talk about RNG though. Random number generator basically means if you shoot somebody, you have 100 pen, and they have 100 millimeters of armor, and it's perfectly flat, no angling whatsoever, you're going to get through about 50% of the time, because you can roll low, you can have 75% pen, or you can roll high and you actually have 125% pen, which on pen is ridiculous. If it's on damage, you should do 100 damage and you have 75 damage, or you have 125 damage. I think that's fine. It adds some variance to the game. But anyway, we're going to talk about RNG. And the next thing is accuracy, which is also related to RNG. Accuracy currently, I believe, is terrible in World of Tanks. That is not to say that you can't hit things, but I think that accuracy stats don't really matter. You can have, I don't know, you're driving around in your IS-7 or whatever, which should have terrible accuracy, but it actually doesn't feel like it has terrible accuracy, and it hits quite often. And that is, if you compare that, for example, to Leopard 1, which should have excellent accuracy, it doesn't actually feel like it has excellent accuracy, and that is terrible. I'm not going to talk about retaining new players, and I'm not going to talk about seal clubbing. I believe those are minor problems. I don't really care about them. However, I am going to talk about tech tree grinds. I'm going to, at some point, hopefully in the next half year, upload a video on tech tree grinds and sort of highlight what I think some of the problems are. Those are the problems I could think of. If you have different problems that you think we should address or that I've missed, then please feel free to post them in the comments and we'll maybe talk about them. Right, now we're going to go to the quick fixes. It's basically just what can Wargaming do in probably the next update. I would suggest that the quick fixes I'm proposing are very easy to do. They're very quick to do, and if Wargaming does that, then we can have a fun game, or sort of fun game, while we wait for the longer updates. First one is matchmaking. Remove +2 -2, make it only +1 -1, and I absolutely do not care which template you use. For whatever I care, it can be 1-14. I don't give a shit. As long as it's +1 -1. That is the premise, and that is where we have to start. The second is RNG and accuracy. Reduce RNG on some issues to 10%. For example, penetration should be no more than 10%. It is incredible that you can have a 300 pen gun and the minimal pen is sort of 220 or something. That is crazy. And the second one is accuracy. Reduce the RNG on the accuracy, and also change the accuracy of some of the tanks to have higher values. For example, I believe tanks such as even the KV2 or whatever have way too good accuracy, and I've been derping around in the KV2 for the last couple of weeks, and it's just hilarious what I can hit at extremely long ranges, and that I can hit someone at 500 meters and do huge amounts of damage is just absolutely crazy. And the third one is artillery. Remove stun. Just completely remove stun, and for the moment we're going to be good. It's still going to require huge amounts of reworking, but at least if you remove stun for now, it's going to be okay. I've been in tier 8 battles, I believe, where artillery had accumulated, I think, 200 seconds of stun, which is over 3 minutes in a 15-minute game. I mean, what? What? It shouldn't be in the game. It just kills you if you try to move out and actually make a play and be aggressive and think about what you're doing and so on, and you get randomly hit by artillery. It stops you from actually moving, and it stops you from doing something, and it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be in the game. And even then, artillery still has the ability to do huge amounts of damage, and the amounts of games I've been in where artillery was in the top 5 damage dealers, I think 60-70% of all games where I play, one artillery player is in the top 5. That is crazy. Anyway, even if we fix those 3 things, we're going to need long-term commitment from wargaming. And that starts with maps. World of Tanks currently is balanced around the idea, or the maps in World of Tanks are balanced around the idea of corridors, of ridges, and of huge open areas with a few bushes. Right. Corridors is quite easy. For example, you have Lakeville, and in Lakeville, if you go through the valley, you have very little room to maneuver. You need excellent frontal armor and an excellent turret to go up on that, small little ridge. It promotes stale gameplay. It promotes the enemy using huge amounts of gold or derp guns that do damage no matter what your frontal armor is, basically. And that is a huge problem because it doesn't promote thinking as well. It just promotes the enemy making mistakes. If they go up, if they don't side scrape well, or if they don't have the appropriate amount of gold or the appropriate amount of armor, they're just not going to go anywhere. And it doesn't promote intelligent gameplay. The second problem is ridges, and like in Lakeville, there is a small ridge, but there are other maps. For example, I think it's is it Fisherman's Bay, where there's sort of I'm going to talk about specific maps, but basically it's you have one ridge in the middle of the map, or at least at equidistance to both teams, and you have to move there, and you have to play around that ridge. And again, it promotes stale gameplay because it means you're waiting for the enemy to make a mistake. You're not actively pursuing openings. You're waiting for the enemy to move too high onto the ridge where he doesn't have gun depression, and you're just going to track him and keep him tracked there and try to take him out. So it doesn't promote you making bold moves. It promotes the enemy making stupid mistakes. And it promotes excellent turret armor, it promotes excellent gun depression, and it promotes artillery, really. And the third problem I see with maps, or one of the huge problems I see with maps, is having huge open areas where you have maybe a ridge, maybe a bush, but some kind of cover at the back. And if the enemy wants to push to that location, they need to push through a huge open area. Take Abbey, take, all of the maps, really. Lakeville has it as well, and Fisherman's Bay has it as well. There's a huge open area. You have a few bushes at the back. Maybe they're on a sort of mountain where you can hide, where you can use cover. And if they want to push through, they're going to get annihilated if they're spotted even once. And that obviously doesn't promote you pushing somewhere. Right, those are the three main problems. So what do we really need? We're going to need one slight vehicle balancing. First of all, we're going to have +1, -1 matchmaking already in this scenario, right? So we're going to need some of the hugely overpowered vehicles like the Object 268 version 4, the Bobject, to be balanced, the 907, some of the premium tanks, sort of small balancing fixes that will adjust some of the vehicles. And then we're going to look at fixing maps. And I'm going to make a huge video talking about every single map and what I think the problems are. But basically, they need to be fixed. And if they don't get fixed, we're going to have stale gameplay no matter what the vehicles look like. And we need maps where we can maneuver properly, where we can explore different avenues of attack, where we can explore different ideas, different metas, that promote different tanks, that kind of stuff. And then when we fix the maps, we need to do a huge amount of fixing the vehicles once more, because then we're going to have a completely different meta. We're going to have completely different maps, and we need completely different vehicles to play on those maps properly. And it's going to require more weak spots, or vehicles actually having weak spots. And it's going to require proper accuracy, and some tanks not having proper accuracy. And it's going to require proper artillery, and so on. The next one is fixing gold ammo. This has been talked about quite often. If you fix the vehicles and if you actually give them weak spots, then we need different gold ammunition. And having different gold ammunition doesn't just mean you're going to reduce damage for gold ammunition by 10% or 25%, because that actually requires you to have more armor, and it makes heavily armored vehicles such as the Mouse or the Type 5 Heavy to be even better than they currently are. And that is obviously not the way we want to. So we need to think about completely reworking gold ammo. When we've rebalanced gold ammo, obviously we need to talk about fixing vehicle balancing once more, because maybe we need to decrease armor for certain vehicles, or we need to reduce their damage or their penetration or something. But it's certainly going to require a bit of fixing once again. Then we need to fix artillery again, because even if we take away all the stun damage that we currently have, I don't think artillery is a fun class to play. And I know that there is a part of the community that thinks that artillery has no place in the game, and I actually disagree. I believe artillery should promote or should discourage camping, and it should encourage you to move around the map and to push and to do something and to be active. And I think that there is a way to fix artillery in that way. And I'm going to talk about that in a separate video. And I think if we do that, we can keep artillery in the game. And then we need to fix vehicle balancing possibly one more time, because obviously all the artillery pieces in the game currently are going to need to be changed. Quite obviously, because if we fix artillery, then we're going to have to fix them in the vehicle balancing sort of way. Right. And if that goes through, that doesn't address some of the smaller problems, but if that goes through, I believe we can finally have a fun game. And that is what I hope. And I would encourage you to join me on that quest and to help me with ideas and to help me explore these ideas. And I hope to see you for that series. Thank you very much.